Becoming unbothered is about setting new boundaries, especially when your emotions are triggered. Okay, so welcome to Michelle Lives Embodied 2.0. And at first, I kind of want to talk about what an emotional trigger is, right? So, an emotional trigger can be a situation, a person, a comment, somebody's behavior, or an event that creates a strong emotional reaction that feels bigger than the moment itself, right? Maybe it's being ignored, being rejected, not feeling validated, feeling misunderstood, or maybe not even being chosen. Okay, those are all things that could trigger our emotions, right? So just remember that the trigger itself isn't always the problem, right? So a lot of times the trigger actually comes from a deep-rooted fear or a belief that we have about ourselves. For me, the reason why I'm bringing this topic up is because recently there was something that happened, and I was sharing something that I felt very strongly about, and needless to say, the people that I was sharing it with spoke over me. Like, not spoke over me, but what I was sharing was just completely ignored, and a conversation was started as if I wasn't attempting to share what I was. And so what at that time, I started to feel a little emotionally triggered. So what I did is I stopped what I was sharing and I removed myself from the situation. And that told me that I needed to start to create boundaries, right? Because to avoid creating emotional triggers for me in that sense, because it was triggering. And for me, I think it came a lot to do with because of the fact that I had always had in the past a belief that nobody would care about what I had to say, right? So that's just a personal example. So that gave me some idea that I needed to create some type of boundaries, to establish boundaries with things that I would be sharing moving forward with people, right? So once that's done, setting boundaries, right? So that's one of the things that we want to do. And then, so what we need to do is reframe how we're questioning ourselves on what's happening. So instead of asking, why are they ignoring me? Why are they treating me this way? You need to ask yourself, why am I letting it bother me? Right? Why does their behavior bother me? And it's so funny because I have 2 teenage daughters, and they're 2 years apart, and they fight a lot. I wouldn't say a lot, but they have their disagreements, but they have their good times where they bond, they get along with each other, and anything can set one or the other off. And I am going to try and work with them with this not letting things bother you. People are going to do things and it's going to bother you. But why do you let what other people do affect you, right? So becoming unbothered is always going to be about shifting the focus back to yourself. That's where your power is, not on what they're doing or why they're doing what they're doing. So I want to recommend, one action step that you could possibly take is, when you're feeling emotionally triggered, of course, is ask yourself really what happened. Evaluate what happened. What emotion did you feel when that thing happened that triggered you? And what story are you telling yourself? So I had to step back and ask myself, what story am I telling myself? Am I telling myself I'm not important enough for these people to listen to me? Am I telling myself that what I do doesn't matter? No, we're not going to do that, right? Because just because they're acting a certain way, that doesn't define who you are. So, the story that you're telling yourself immediately after you're triggered, reframe that story. Focus back on yourself. What fears did that bring up for you? So we're going to ask ourselves, what fears did that bring up for me? For me, it was the fear that people aren't going to care what I have to say. That's my fear. People, they don't care. But that's not true. That's not true at all. That's how the situation made me feel, but that's not what the truth is, right? So let's be honest with ourselves, okay? Once you can actually identify what the trigger and the fear or the belief is about yourself, that's when it will start to loosen its control over you. Now, I'm not saying that you're not going to continue to encounter these, because even though I have been working on myself and working on becoming unbothered and not letting things that people do bother me, I have to always sometimes, circle back and think, those fears and those triggers, they still come up occasionally, but I always remind myself, that I am not defined by somebody else's actions. I am defined by the story that I'm telling myself, right? Okay. Now, for all of my people who are still with me, following my videos, leave me some comments or shares. If you're new to the channel, thank you for joining. Michelle Lives Embodied. I'm working towards creating this channel for becoming the woman that you admire, becoming the woman that I admire on this journey. So join the channel, subscribe. I created a community page free for us here on the channel. So like, subscribe, and share with somebody who you feel like may be wanting to join in on the journey with us. Okay. Now, one of the things, let's go back. One of the things that we want to do when after we're creating these boundaries and we've identified our trigger, and is, becoming unbothered is one thing that you're going to have to learn how to do, is not react when you're triggered, right? So one way of not reacting is you want to remove yourself from the situation, like I did. Remove yourself from the situation, go for a walk. I had to come to the gym. Even though I wanted to fix the problem between my daughters, I knew that I was emotionally triggered. So I had to remove myself, come to the gym, so that way I don't let my emotions get the best of me when I'm trying to communicate and talk to them and understand how each one of them are feeling. So the goal is to at least give yourself 30 minutes before you respond or react when you're feeling emotionally triggered. The goal is not to suppress our emotions. The goal is to create enough space between the emotion and your response to the situation. Okay? And that allows you the power to choose how you are going to show up. You know, showing up as an emotionally regulated woman. And when you're in this pause, we're going, to ask ourselves, the facts about how the situation made us feel, right? So now, you've identified the trigger. You have asked yourself, why is it bothering you? Identifying the trigger, the real root of the cause, the fear, the belief that you have been telling yourself. Now, creating those boundaries, right? It's going to be one of the most important things that becoming unbothered is, and becoming the woman that you admire is going to be, is creating really strong boundaries. So that way, those kind of things that come up, situations when people do things that would normally trigger you, you don't react, okay? Because you're coming from a regulated place. So you took a step back before you react. That's going to be how you're going to protect your peace, is creating that boundary. There's a lot of ways you can do it. For me, I decided there will be a limited amount of things that I'll be sharing with people. If you're interested in knowing, of course, I'll be happy to share with you. But unless it's initiated, I will no longer be sharing. So that was one boundary that I established for myself. Now, I hope this all made sense for everyone. I'm still new on the journey and learning how to become the woman that I admire. And I'm glad that you took the time to sit with me, and I hope that this helped you in maybe just a little bit. Okay, so good night. I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.